You are now listening to 5-Star Wrestling Radio. Rewind.
Three of the show. Like I said, we're going to discuss the best and the worst wrestling games. They've come a long way. Wrestling games were at first some of the most horrible games we got. Some of the ones in the 80s were pretty fun. Some that many people don't remember, Not Soon Pro Wrestling was pretty fun. But WWF games were garbage. We're going to get into that. But they've come a long way. And where they at today, you know, we have to thank the ones on my list that I'm getting ready to read off for that. Because at first they weren't giving us that. And some developers finally took the time to actually give us stuff that we actually thought was, that we actually feel today is still standing up to test of time. It's pretty good. There's some games on this list that are even better than the ones that we buy today. Well, some of the best wrestling games ever made, all the games that I list on the bad and the good list are all my opinion. Feel free to disagree when you comment, or comment on my page, comment on the video. The best, one of the best, on my opinion, number one. Many of you will probably disagree with me. WCW NWO Revenge, number one on my list. And the reason why is because it kind of set the bar. You know, it kind of made people take notice that wrestling games could be very, very good. The modes were pretty bare bone. I didn't really like the modes because there was only championship mode for each belt, though there were like 6 belts. There was the WCW title, United States title, Cruiserweight, Tag Team, Television. But it was pretty fun. You know, defeat 10 guys, get a title shot. You know, it pretty much holds up. I thought it was pretty good, even though I think it could have used some more modes. Customization was really good. You could actually change the look of different guys. I wish you could have been able to put them in a different group you wanted, but otherwise the customization was good for it at the time because, like I said, WWF Warzone was overrated. The look, I didn't really care for it. It didn't look too good. The roster was excellent. Everybody was on that game. Everybody from Hogan to Bret Hart to Booker T to Benoit, Rey Mysterio. Even a couple of fictional wrestlers made the list. They were basically the kind of the mirror image of the Japanese guys. If you're familiar with Japanese wrestling, guys like Hayabusa, Jinsei Shinzaki, Kenta Kobashi, a lot of those fictional guys, you could tell by the moves, the Burning Hammers, the Falcon Arrows, were based on those guys. But they didn't have the rights to use Japanese names and talent, so they had to fictionalize them. The control scheme, perfect control scheme. Control scheme, the scheme was so perfect until it passed down to so many different versions of that game. From Revenge to WrestleMania 2000 to No Mercy. It was just awesome. Second on my list for being a great game, WWF No Mercy. The roster was way even better than WrestleMania 2000 was. Way better than Revenge was. Excellent game modes. Everything from ladder matches to hardcore matches. Fall count anywhere. They bled. You could fight backstage. You know, storyline mode was pretty good. It was very good. You could actually lose a match and you didn't have to do the match over, so you could keep progressing to the scripted storyline. If you lose a match, it would just take you an alternate road in the storyline, giving you another reason to come back and see, well, what would happen if I had won that match. The control scheme, same as Revenge, same as WrestleMania 2000. Awesome. Easy as hell to pull off a move, but yet still, you know, required a lot of strategy. Very good. A game like I spoke of in the previous part of this show, Power Move Pro Wrestling for the PlayStation, 1996. That was a game that many people didn't even like really pay attention to, because that game was just like, it was really underestimated. A lot of people didn't really understand that wrestling games could be actually about wrestling and not on that the WrestleMania bullshit like the previous ones were. Games like In Your House, where the games were just like basically Mortal Kombat. It was garbage. And I thought that the games were really, really good, especially for its time. And that game still holds up today. It should be considered a cult classic. It introduced wrestling. It introduced blood. It introduced multiple wrestling maneuvers. I thought it was really good. Another two on my list tied for fourth place, SmackDown and SmackDown 2, both released in 2000. 2000 was a huge year for wrestling games. No Mercy, SmackDown, and SmackDown 2 all released the same year. SmackDown 2 and No Mercy released around the same time. Huge year. SmackDown 1 and SmackDown 2 introduced a lot of good wrestling to the WWF franchise of video games after they broke away from Acclaim. You know, I thought it was just pure indication of how awesome a wrestling game could be for the PlayStation. WCW NWO World Tour, number 5 on my list. It introduced the THQ moveset, animation, and as well as the wrestling controls that carried over all through the generation of wrestling games for the Nintendo 64. That's how influential WCW NWO World Tour was. Simply awesome. Each one of those games that I listed are, in my opinion, what I feel are the best. Feel free, you know, I know other people have their opinion, but these games are so influential. A lot of these games are still played today. When I get fed up with the bullshit, which is WWF SmackDown versus Raw sometime, I hop on and I put on WCW NWO Revenge. I cut on No Mercy. No Mercy is a good game, but the main thing that pissed me off about No Mercy was the fact that you could play real long on that game. You could play awesome on that game, but for some awkward reason, it was a flaw in the cartridge because you didn't need a memory card for Revenge. You didn't need a memory card for any Nintendo 64 game because the cartridges were made to have their own memory. But the problem is that it kept erasing the memory off No Mercy. No matter how far you got in the game, you could come back sometimes and you would look and, oh shit, you know, where's all my progress at? It took it away. But still, No Mercy is an awesome game. That's what I feel in my opinion. Today's games need to take a page out of the books of these games because customization was awful in these games now. You can't customize these guys in these games. In Revenge, you could customize. No Mercy, you could customize. Power Move Pro Wrestling. SmackDown, you couldn't. But WCW World Tour, all the games for 64 that were wrestling games, you could. I hope they bring it back because these games just stand the test of time. When we come back on the last part of this show, we're going to be discussing the worst wrestling games in the world. And just looking at this list just gives me a headache. Worst wrestling games ever in the history of wrestling, coming up next on Nsomnia Radio.